Well, we're going to continue on our discussion about creation, and with us today is our good buddy John Mittendorf. He's one of the surrogate speakers for Answers in Genesis, and we've been talking about the sufficiency of Genesis' account of creation. Or does the Bible need a little help?
Excellent point, Perry. And we decided to do this, the sufficiency of the Genesis account of creation. The first thing that comes to mind is, as you just said, does Scripture, or the Genesis account, need science to expand it so we can fully understand it? And that's the main question.
The argument.
That's the main argument.
All right, let me say before we get too wrapped up here, we're going to give away, John has provided here a excellent DVD called Noah's Ark, Thinking Outside the Box, and this is a great, oh, there it is up on the screen. So be listening at the end. We'll tell you how you can possibly win this. Tell us about this quickly. That
DVD, Perry, is probably the latest thinking on what the Ark probably could have looked like based on Mesopotamian ships that were built at that time, which Noah probably would have done. God just gave him some basic dimensions, but he didn't tell him exactly how to build it. So if he would have built it on the way Mesopotamian ships were built at that time, that's what the Ark would have looked like. And then, of course, the DVD, they go through and they talk about how they would have ventilated the Ark and how they would have fed the animals, and because that's also another question. Well, if you have thousands of animals on a boat for a year, how are you going to feed them and all the other things that go along with that? So that DVD answers a lot of those questions from today's modern thinking.
You know, there's a part about this story, it's a little bit of a sidebar here, but wouldn't you like to hear God's voice that clear to the point where you would do it?
Yes. And
and when you look in the Old Testament, it seems that God spoke clearer to people then than he does today. I mean, that's the appearance. Or can we hear God like they heard God?
I think there's cases that we can hear God very clearly, very clearly. But I think the focus on this point is, particularly in the Noahic flood, is that when you have to realize that it hadn't rained up until that time because the earth was watered by a mist, according to Genesis. And so when God tells Noah, I want you to build a boat because it's going to rain, Noah's going, what's rain? See? Yes, there was an ocean, but what is rain? But the key is that when God told Noah to build this boat 450 feet long because it's going to rain, Noah goes, what's rain? In the biblical account, he says, and he did it. In other words, he didn't question God. He didn't say, well, give me a couple days to think about that. I'm going to do it. Just that simple.
But God and man had seemingly an open conversation.
Well, same way with God and Moses. Look at Moses and God talking back and forth together.
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
Wow.
Fascinating?
Right. Yeah, it is. All right. So, anyway, does Genesis need a little interpretation by the science department at OSU?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And you know, we started this series last time. We started with the word theology. And as you know, theology is the study of God, a word from God.
Right.
And I made the comment last time, and I got several comments on that. What do you mean that we don't need science to illuminate the Genesis account of creation for us so we better understand it? And I said, well, if you look at it from a simplistic viewpoint, theology is the study of God. Creation was a one-time event of miraculous events. Science is based on repetition, being able to observe it, and testable, and then come up with some type of a theory, correct? Science cannot be applied to creation because science takes time, it takes natural laws, it takes repetition, it takes observation. Creation was a one-time miraculous event by God. The two do not go together, and that's why you cannot use science to explain creation, because creation was a miraculous event.
So what's your home phone number, John? I think we ought to give out your home phone number.
776.
No, don't do that.
I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
But you know, it's really simple. When somebody says, I need science to explain creation, the first red flag should pop up, and the red flag should be, well, wait a minute. Are you telling me that Scripture is not complete, that God only gave us a partial account, that God needs the thinking of modern man? By the way, it changes every 20 years, according to Discover Magazine. According to Discover Magazine, all of the scientific theories will be proven false within 2 decades.
Whoa.
That came from a secular magazine that said that. That's in the 2003 issue. Fascinating comment, isn't it?
Well, hold your seat. What's next? Yeah.
So in the notes, and by the way, the notes are going to be available from last time and this time. If you go to the Dove, www.thedove.us, and just put down something like John's notes, Sue can send them to you, but give us a couple hours because I sent her the wrong set of notes this morning. So when I go home this morning, I'll send her the right set.
Okay.
I'll send her the right set. But when you say that we need science to illuminate Genesis, if Discover Magazine was correct, that means if I'm going to use science, am I going to use yesterday's version or am I going to use today's version? Because today's version also might be wrong within 20 years. So you see the problems you're having there? Whereas the Bible was written well over 5,000 years ago, the Old Testament, and it's the inerrant work of God, correct? It has never changed. So that brings us to today's program, perspicuity. The perspicuity of Scripture. And what's the definition of perspicuity?
Well, I'm reading it, but go ahead.
Boy, you were a great host
No,
to work with.
I
Did you know that?
I just, trying to do my
Webster's
part.
Dictionary says it's easily understood, it's transparent, and it's clear.
Okay.
Okay? And I think to illuminate that, I got several things that I want to talk about this morning. The first one is inerrancy and completeness. Is the Genesis account in Scripture inerrant and complete?
Well, I guess to be along the lines of perspicuity is yes.
Excellent, excellent point. Let's go to 2 Timothy 3:16 for the answer to that question. And what's 2 Timothy 3:16 tell us?
I gotta find it.
All Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, thoroughly equipped for every good work. And what that says is that all Scripture is complete, inspired by God, and is suitable for instruction and equipping us in our daily lives, which includes the Genesis account of creation.
Pretty simple.
Pretty simple, isn't it? But somehow we tend to think, well, you know, I find Genesis hard to believe. You know, I really can't check in with that. So let me use modern science, millions and billions of years, to explain the fossil record and all the rest of that. And basically what 2 Timothy 3:16 tells us is we don't need that. That everything that we need is contained from cover to cover in the Bible.
None of this works without faith.
None of it works without faith, which is going to be the main point of our next program, which is going to be in September. Faith. When you open the Bible, the first thing you come to is what? When you get past the title page, Genesis 1:1.
Yeah.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. 10 words. The bottom line is do you believe that or not? If you don't believe it, or if you think it needs modification, or if you think it's not complete, does that perspective then have the possibility to potentially affect the rest of the way that you view Scripture?
The moment you insert man in
or science
into that, then God's no longer God.
Let's talk about modification of Scripture just for a minute.
Oh no!
Just in case there's any doubt.
You're going to take me back to the King James Version here?
No.
I didn't know we were going to get in that argument.
No.
Okay.
The Bible is very clear in its admonition that Scripture shall not be modified by additions or deletions. Correct?
Okay, and that's found in
5 verses. Do not add to his words, lest he rebuke you and you be found a liar. That's Proverbs 30, verse 6. Jeremiah 26:2. Do not diminish a word. That's pretty clear, right? Deuteronomy 4:2. You shall not add to the word which I command you. Whatever I command you, be careful to observe it. You shall not add to it nor take away from it. Deuteronomy 12:32. And number 5, if anyone adds to these things, this is found in Revelation 22, God will add to him the plagues that are written in this book, and if anyone takes away from the words of this book, this prophecy, God shall take away from his part of the book of life, from the holy city, and from the things which are written in this book. Does God approach Scripture very, very seriously as far as the way that we perceive it and use it?
Well, to the point he regards it higher than his name.
Higher than his name. Exactly right. And by the way, these verses that we're using this morning are all in the notes, so if people want to go back, they're in there. In studying for this one, Perry, I came across something that I think, from my perspective, is mind-blowing. We talked about inerrancy, completeness, modification of Scripture. Let's talk about inclusiveness just for a minute. Is Genesis, and particularly 1:1, the 10 words, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, is that all inclusive, or does it need any extra embellishment from science?
I would say it's very inclusive.
More than you will know. Now stay with me on this one. In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. That's 10 words. Let's go back to 1903, and in 1903, an English philosopher and a sociologist named Herbert Spencer died. A very well-known philosopher. And he was the gentleman that coined the phrase survival of the fittest, which Darwin jumped on right off the bat. Darwin didn't coin the phrase survival of the fittest. Herbert Spencer did. Mm-hmm. But Herbert Spencer wrote a lot of books. One of them was called First Principles. In that book, he outlined what he called the categories of the knowable. And this was hailed as a major scientific achievement. And what Herbert Spencer said was that everything that we see, that we know, can be placed into one of 5 categories: time, force, action, space, and matter. That was hailed as a major scientific breakthrough achievement by Herbert Spencer. If we apply that to Genesis 1:1.
Okay, so you got time, force.
Time, force, action, space, matter.
Matter.
Okay, here we go. In the beginning, that's time, God, that's force, created, that's action, the heavens, that's space, the earth, that's matter. If Herbert would have looked at the Bible, he'd have been 5,000 years ahead of time.
Wow.
Because that was written over 5,000 years ago. And yet, when Herbert Spencer discovered that, just prior to 1903, that was hailed as a major scientific breakthrough. But yet, when we read the first 10 words in the Bible, in the beginning God created the heaven and earth, we tend to think, well, you know, that's kind of simplistic. It doesn't really tell us that much. It tells us everything we want to know.
All right, let's deal with simplicity and clarity. Why are those important?
Simplicity and clarity. Why are they important to Genesis? First of all, is the Genesis account simple? Yes, it is. And I think from 2 perspectives. First of all, using the verse, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, which is Genesis 1:1, there's the principle of simplicity that goes something like this. We ought to take what God says and understand that if God said it, that's probably what He meant, or else He would have said it a different way.
Pretty simple.
Pretty simple. Okay. And what that means is God said it so we can understand it. Right. Okay? Particularly the Old Testament. Particularly when you're going through genealogies, right?
Oh, boy.
I'm not going there.
Okay.
I'm not going there.
Or get in the book of Leviticus. It gets a little tight in there.
Yeah. But secondly, the simplicity of Scripture is also known as the principle of straightforwardness. And that's found in Proverbs 8:8-9. And it goes like this. All the utterances of my mouth are in righteousness. There is nothing crooked or perverted in them. They are all straightforward to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. Do I need science to explain Genesis to me?
Not according to that.
Not according to that, no. Okay. But now let's drop down to clarity, the clarity of Scripture. And clarity, again, Webster's Dictionary, defines it as the quality of being clear, easy to understand. Now, let's apply that to Genesis. And I would suggest that the Bible was written so it's easy to understand, particularly the Old Testament, even to small children.
Yeah, because you're admonished to teach the Scriptures to your children.
Yeah, the 6th chapter of Deuteronomy is found in Deuteronomy 6:7. Let me read it to you. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them, talking about the Scriptures, when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down to sleep, and when you rise up. Deuteronomy 6:7. In order for you to teach the Scriptures to your children, and this was basically the time frame, 40 years in the desert, if you are admonished to teach the Scriptures to your children, they have to be simple and clear and easily understandable so they know what you're talking about. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what Deuteronomy 6:7 tells us. Now, that brings up an interesting point. Probably one of the most debatable words or sections of Scripture in the Bible is in Genesis, in the creation account, and the word day.
Oh, here we go. Time.
Here we go. Time.
Yeah.
Does the Bible define how long a period of time a day is?
Well, my John Mittendorf answer to that is...
If you want me to step on a hand grenade, I will.
No. I'm going to go back to the creation of the first day.
Okay.
Which would have been a 24-hour period.
Okay, but some people will say, well, you know, in 2 Peter, Perry, it says a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day.
Yeah, and it goes on to say that you're supposed to forgive somebody 70 times 70.
Yeah.
I mean, so are those just, is that poetic language, so to speak?
Okay. First of all, let me approach this from two angles. That I want to approach this from the Hebrew perspective, because the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. The New Testament was written in Greek. Okay. So let's approach this from Hebrew, because I think Hebrew is a lot more definitive than the English language is. Plus, since Hebrew has been modernized into English language, I think we've lost a lot of the richness and the flavor that Hebrew offers us.
Yeah.
So, does the Bible explicitly say when you read it that a day is a 24-hour period of time? It does not say that. But when you read the Bible in Hebrew, does it say that?
Well, no, the last time I read Hebrew, I don't know that.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes, it does. And let me see if I can build my case.
Okay.
If we're going to look at the word day, we look at it from two perspectives. Either it means long periods of time, millions and billions of years, you've probably heard that before,
right.
Or it means a 24-hour calendar day.
Yeah.
Okay? So it's fascinating to me that the word day in the Bible is really only under argument in Genesis, nowhere else. As an example, if I say that Jonah was in the belly of the great fish for 3 days, basically what are you thinking?
Yeah, 3 days.
72 hours
72
approximately.
hours.
Okay. And so on.
And Christ in the grave, or in the tomb.
Exactly right. But somehow, when we use the same word day in Genesis, we say, well, no, that it can mean, it can have a lot of different meanings, and people will normally point to 2 Peter as a classic example.
Right.
And by the way, 2 Peter has nothing to do with creation. Let me read you a commentary on 2 Peter 3:8. 1 day is 1,000 years. God understands time much differently from man. From man's viewpoint, Christ's coming seems like a long time away. From God's viewpoint, it will not be long. Beyond that, general reference may be specific indication of the fact that there are actually 1,000 years between the first phase of the day of the Lord at the end of the tribulation day and the last phase 1,000 years later at the end of the millennial kingdom, when the Lord creates the new heaven and the new earth. That's the commentary on 2 Peter 3. It's got nothing to do with creation. But people will just say, well, it just says a day is like 1,000 years, 1,000 years is like a day.
It's also an attempt to define, I don't know how we can do that, as God being timeless.
Timeless.
Yeah.
That's basically what that verse is saying, that to God, today, to us, a day is 24 hours.
Right.
But to God, a day can be 1,000 years, a million years, a million years, a billion. It doesn't make any difference.
Yeah.
It's timeless.
Timeless.
Is basically what that verse is saying.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's irrelevant. It's a bad argument. Okay. So that is not a good argument to use. And so what happens is in the scientific secular community. Remember our last program? I gave you several examples of some Christian organizations that believe in the inerrancy of Scripture, that say, yes, we believe in the Bible, but Genesis needs to be modified so we can slip in long ages of time, millions and billions of years. Correct? Okay, now, let me tell you how they do that.
Quite notable, by the way, doing this.
Yeah. Yes, there is. What they will do is they will take Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, which says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and the second verse says, now the earth was without shape and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the watery deep, but the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the water. Now to me, Perry, that just seems to flow along. In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and the earth was without shape and empty, and darkness, and so on. It seems to flow from the beginning to the end, correct? But here's what's being used today. Is that in the second verse it says, now the earth was, that's the key word, without shape and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the watery deep. Some people, will, and actually it's more than some, will say, well, you know that the word was really means became. Let me retranslate that for you, is basically what's being said.
What's the Hebrew say?
What's what say?
The Hebrew say.
The Hebrew says was, it doesn't say became.
Okay.
Okay, so what they do is then in the next verse, the word was is retranslated or changed to the word became. So the next verse would then read as follows. The earth became without shape and empty. The Bible doesn't say that. And by the way, if you listen to somebody explain this, they will explain this very, very well, why you should change was to became.
And the reasoning?
The reasoning is, let me finish the verse.
All right.
So the next verse, verse 2, would then read as follows. The earth became without shape and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the watery deep, but the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the water. And what they're saying is at that time when God created the heavens and the earth, that's when he kicked Satan and 1/3 of the angels out of heaven, which created immediate chaos. So who is the prince of the air or the ruler of the earth? It's Satan, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay, God's the universe. So that destroyed the earth. God then had to come back down and redo it and do it over again. During that time frame, there was a long lapse of time that elapsed, and that's where you find millions and billions of years, and that's where you find the old fossil record. That's how they take science and, I'm going to say, insert it in between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. It's a little complicated, isn't it?
It's complicated, but that somewhat suggests that God was out of control.
It not only suggests that God's out of control, but it suggests that God didn't do it right the first time, so he had to come back and he had to do it right the second time.
Or something was happening out of his control that he had to suspend this activity.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Now, why do you go through all that hocus pocus? First of all, the Bible does not say that. Now, remember we just talked about the verses that says, do not add to or delete from the Scripture. Mm-hmm. So from my perspective, in the interest of clarity, as soon as somebody says, let me reinterpret this verse for you, a red flag should go up. Yeah. Because what you're going to tell me is something different from what the Scripture tells me. And Scripture, 2 Timothy 3:16 tells me it's inerrant and it's complete. So if you're going to tell me, and basically what I'm talking about is biologos.
That what? Okay.
And progressive creationism.
Mm.
And by the way, what I just said, Perry, commonly falls under the gap theory, the ruin and reconstruction theory, the day-age theory, and progressive creation. There's a lot of people that are using that concept of sliding long ages of time in between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2.
Are they trying to justify carbon dating or something, or what's the deal?
They're trying to justify that science has an equal footing or a superior footing with the Bible. And science should be able to be married to Scripture.
When really science should be used to prove Scripture.
Well, from my perspective, you can use science. Let me put it this way.
Not totally. I mean, not doing it wrong. That's not an absolute, but I mean, science becomes one of the interpreting tools.
Okay, I like that. I like that one better. That science points towards Scripture.
All right. Well, here we go. We're out of time.
It gets a little complicated, right?
All right. Bottom line is, you're back to the 24-hour day period. Give me 10 seconds on that.
The 24-hour day period in Hebrew, and we'll cover this. Why don't we cover this in more detail next time? That in Hebrew, if the word day is used with a numeric 1, 2, 3, if it's associated with evening and morning, if it's associated with night, it always means 24 hours. Always. Okay. Now, how many of those are used in the Genesis account? All of them are.
Thanks, John. We'll see you next time.
You bet.